So thank you for joining us, Kain. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thank you for thoughtfully looking at what we did and agreeing to work with us. Really appreciate that as well. Me and Kain have been working together in the industry for many years, and he's seen some of the craziest stuff that you can see in the industry together with me, and he's still here, and I'm still here. So I think there's just a very basic mutual respect from the fact that we are still somehow standing after everything. So, Kain, thank you again, and I'm just going to kind of jump into questions because I think
Let's do it.
people would love to hear from you.
Let's do it.
So, what do you think is going on in DeFi at the moment, and what stage are we at now?
I think the first thing I'll say is you said before that you appreciated our patience, or my patience, or everyone's patience. I don't remember having patience, so I feel like that was, I just want to set the record
Relative
straight.
to me.
We were not patient at all, and so I think that's part of the reason why we're here today. So I think in DeFi today, my view is that we are at a point where things work, right? And that is an important point because I don't think we were there, a few years ago, even during DeFi summer, right? DeFi summer, everyone was very excited about all of these new things, and we had contracts deployed to mainnet. There was a lot of excitement. We had yield farming. We had some crazy Ponzi schemes. It was all awesome, but I don't think that it was necessarily working or sustainable. Right? And I think today, a few years later, we're at a point where it actually does work. And so my view is that the next step is we have working systems, we need to bring them to people. We can't expect people to come to them. We need to actually build, on-ramps, interfaces, et cetera, that really welcome people to use these systems that we've built, this infrastructure that we've built, and that can compete with centralized services, right? So that we can provide the security that, we think DeFi offers, but with the convenience that people expect, right? If it's not convenient, if it's not easy to use, then I think that we will continue to be a kind of niche player, even within the crypto ecosystem. So I think that's the key right now. It's like we've got the systems, it's working. We need to now bring it to the people.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, we absolutely have to get to feature parity with the centralized alternatives, and then we have to go beyond. And luckily for us, we have this trust minimized deterministic guarantee, which the centralized systems just won't have. So I think you're right. Once we reach parity and that guarantee still exists, we all just have a better system. So I think that's right. So in terms of cross-chain, what do you think that secure and efficient cross-chain connectivity can do for the entire blockchain industry?
Well, I had a long campaign for the last few years trying to get cross-chain to not be a thing, if people remember, trying to get everyone to just use Optimism so we were all in the same place and we didn't have to do cross-chain stuff. Unfortunately, that didn't work out as well as I had hoped. So we live in a world now, for good or ill, right, where we have multiple different execution environments. Right? That's just the reality. And so, for projects having multiple deployments across multiple chains, there's simple issues like governance, right? You have different users in different chains. How do you govern these things? You can't have a central point of governance unless you can communicate with each other. For liquidity sharing across protocols, we can't do that if we can't communicate across chain. So we live in a world where there are multiple chains, and it seems like that is going to be the state of the world, and it's probably going to get, more interesting before it gets simpler, I would say. We have chains that are converting from L1s into L2s and all kind, L3s, et cetera. So this idea of like an internet of contracts and an internet of chains, I think is just here. That's the reality. And so now we need to work out how we get them to talk to each other.
Yeah, makes sense. How many L's deep things will go? I don't know.
L15.
L whatever. I don't know. We'll see. Depends how much scalability we can squeeze out.
That's the bottom. L15, I think.
L15.
Is where it stops.
That's his prediction. I don't know what it is. We'll see how much scalability we can squeeze out of every L. Eventually, it could be like Mario Brothers. You can just. What level are you at? What level am I at? But in any case, I think the fragmentation is going to continue. Fundamentally, we didn't create, guess you would call it gross settlement, like a single gross settlement environment where I can settle my financial transaction and my gaming transaction and my NFT transaction, and so now, because the scalability isn't there, get ready for Mario Brothers, basically, is where we're going.
Agreed.
Makes sense, yeah. So there we are, Chainlink cross-chain. It's definitely something we need to solve. So what is the value of cross-chain connectivity for Synthetix, and what are you going to use it for, and why is that important?
Yeah, so we've been cross-chain for a while, right? We became cross-chain even before there was really a solution for the cross-chain messaging problem. And thankfully, Chainlink were willing, under some duress, I suppose, to build a bespoke solution for us to enable our cross-chain communication. So we didn't have a choice. We had to move to an L2. We were one of the first to move to an L2. Ethereum mainnet was just not sufficient for the things that we were building, and we really kind of hit those scaling bottlenecks. And so the point was, we need to be able to run on mainnet and on Optimism at the same time, right? Like that was critical. So you guys stepped up and built us this, very bespoke solution for Synthetix, which has been awesome. It's worked really well. But what it has meant is that for us to turn up and ask you to build another couple of bespoke solutions was probably unlikely, right? Johan's looking at me right now. He's not buying it, right? That was not going to happen. So we got 2 chains, great, but what about 5 chains, right? That was just not going to be possible. And so I think you guys, committed to getting CCIP out there, right? And that at that point we would have a generalized solution that everyone could use, and it wouldn't be, bespoke integrations, across multiple chains. And so for us, I think, CCIP has always been the target, right? Like we've had this bespoke, kind of pseudo CCIP thing that was just built for Synthetix across these 2 chains for, like almost a couple of years now, right? But we needed something that was generalizable that, didn't need to be a bespoke solution for Synthetix. So that was just not going to scale. So I think now we're really excited to have this, and it opens up the possibility of going to many more chains for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a generalized system is obviously the way to go. And if I thought the fragmentation was going to get less, then it wouldn't be as useful. But I think the fragmentation is only going to go sky high, because everyone's going to make an app chain. And who knows if that'll have some levels in it. It's definitely just, you need a generalizable, scalable system. So what led you to choose CCIP then as a cross-chain system, as the generalizable solution?
I mean, for us, I think the history that we have with Chainlink for oracles goes back a long way as well, right? We were one of the first projects to use Chainlink oracles on mainnet, and that has been a huge relief for us as a project to be able to rely on Chainlink for that. And so, it was never really a choice. I think because we had that relationship and we're able to come to Chainlink and say, here's the problem that we have, right? Like we know CCIP is a thing, but we have a specific problem today. We need to solve that. Can you help us solve it? We were able to get that bespoke solution as opposed to just waiting, right? And I feel like the alternative for us would have been build something ourselves, right? Which is what we did. You go back to ancient history of like 2018, 2019, we had to build our own oracles, which was a nightmare, right? And we definitely did not want to go back to that same situation of running our own cross-chain messaging system, right? Like we wanted to be able to rely on something that was as secure as Chainlink oracles. So I think it was kind of a no-brainer, provided you were willing to do it for us, and you were. But obviously we've been eagerly awaiting CCIP since then, so that we get the generalizable solution, so that we can go to multiple chains, and now we're here today, and obviously that's really exciting for us.
Yeah, really exciting for us as well. I think the collaboration we have with Kain and Synthetix and others that give us feedback and let us really understand what the problems are and think through things is definitely useful. And I'm glad that you don't have to run your own messaging system.
So are we.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a long road, a lot of security things. I think this thing went through multiple audits. And now that it's out, we're very hopeful it can create the security that's needed, and that the assets that are on CCIP can actually be viewed as better assets because they're less risky because of the security. So if you have a surrogate through CCIP, it should be more useful and more valuable to you than a surrogate through somewhere else, because the reliability and the security of the CCIP surrogate is much, much higher. And so that's hopefully where we arrive as the track record and the security properties continue to work. So this Internet of Contracts idea that I briefly discussed, and that everything's just going to become an interconnected network of separate blockchains that'll eventually just be one big global connected network of blockchains, the Internet of Contracts. Is that something that adds up for you? Is that something you're largely on board with?
Yeah, it is. I mean, as you were talking, I was sort of thinking about it, and I think one of the things that the crypto industry does is we tackle a problem without necessarily thinking through the implications of it, right? And I think that that's important. When you're early, you kind of have to do something, right? You have to be biased towards action. If you're worried about 10 steps from now, what's going to happen and like what will be the problems, and you sit there kind of wringing your hands, you will maybe end up never doing anything, right? And so like on some level, you just need to start building stuff and see what happens and see what breaks and see what the issues are. And I think that this idea of like the Internet of Contracts is basically one of those things where we all started building stuff. We built a bunch of chains. We didn't really think through the implications of how they would talk to each other. And the incentives were like build more chains, do weird stuff, do experiments. And now we're all kind of sitting here going, well, what the hell do we do with this now, right? We have like 50 L1s, and now they're converting to L2s and a bunch of L2s, and it's something that's not manageable, right? And I think that if we had all kind of gotten together and there was some top-down coordination mechanism to, like say, don't do this, this is going to end up, being painful, then we might have tried to do something else. But the reality is that's just not the way that it worked out, right? That, the incentives were such that everyone went out and experimented, and now here we are. We've got a bunch of experiments, but they don't talk to each other, and they need to be able to. So that really, that kind of, that I think sat pretty well with me. I think that's just the reality of the situation that we're in.
Do you think it's going to continue? People are going to keep making blockchains, L1s, L2s, L15s?
It's funny because like even, you've got Coinbase making their own blockchain now, right? Mm-hmm. Which for me, I think is super bullish for a number of reasons, because the reality is that the centralized entities at some point need to decentralize, right? Like there's a tipping point where they're kind of forced into decentralizing, so they have the properties that these other decentralized systems have. And then you have like L2s turning into super chains, where now you've got app chains, and so like what looked 9 months ago like a single chain, it's like, okay, well, it's a single chain, we can manage it now, just like turned into a million chains, right? And you're like, well, okay. So that's, one L2 turns into 100 L2s or whatever, or L3s, or, a bunch of stuff, right? So it just feels inevitable to me that this is going to continue until we hit some sort of breaking point. And on some level, I guess CCIP makes that easier, right? So, for good or ill, right? We can have even more chains now, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
But like, I think that like the ship sailed, right? Like that was going to happen anyway, so, we need to solve the problem.
Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned is right. The incentives are just there for everybody to create eventually probably their own app chain. And that app chain will then need to interact with a bunch of different app chains in all kinds of different other places, other methods, other standards. And there will really just be like two universes. There will be the public chain, app chain universe, and there will be the bank, whatever, we're not public chains, we're digital assets or whatever we call ourselves, universe. And then eventually those two universes will collide. And we want to accelerate all of that. Because frankly, the faster we accelerate it, the faster we get there. And it's just going to be more fun. So let's do it.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely. It's fun.
Thank you very much, Kain, for coming and chatting with us. Thank you for all your feedback and collaboration. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.